Hello and welcome back to the channel. AYN have just dropped some new video content. Today they're looking at their software showcase. So I was a little bit excited about this. This is their own little custom piece of software that allows you to make changes to the RGB and other stuff, was all we were led to believe. So let's watch it together and see what we can see. First thing actually, I'm going to pause here, go back a tiny bit. There you go. Everybody notice that? It's not connected to Wi-Fi, but in Software Center, Loki Control Center, it is connected to Wi-Fi. That's a bit interesting. Oh, hopefully that's just a little bug, but okay, let's carry on. So we saw there was an RGB system theme there, so we'll get back to that in a minute. So this is good to see that they've got a little tool that allows you to adjust the TDP, the GPU frequency, the CPU maximum clock, I think, which is good for power saving. And there's a couple of there's a resolution button down there, so we'll see what that does in a minute. What I don't see is it's just sliders. There's no options to key anything in or save a profile. So hopefully that'll come, because obviously it's great being able to adjust stuff on the fly. That really helps me when it comes to making just pause just now. Being able to adjust these settings on the fly really helps me when it comes to testing games and getting them running at the best possible speed. But long term it's no great, because you might set your CPU maximum and your fan speed and various settings for one game, but that isn't necessarily going to work for the next game that you play. So it'd be good if we could save profiles, so it'd be good if that could be added to this. That's the only thing I pick up from there. Although it's good to see they've got a tool. The tool looks a little bit janky to load up. They've not used one of their little buttons or a combination of their own little buttons. It's pushing in the right thumbstick and it'll look like pressing the bumper at the same time. So as you can see that at the start, we'll just quickly skip back to the start and you can see that look. Did you see that? So I'm going to push down on two buttons at the same time. It's never great. If it works in every game, it's not too bad, but then there's also a chance you might actually be pushing those two button combinations in a game and bring up your control center. Anyway, let's skip forward back to that point where we're at. Anyways, that's about here. So, one thing I've noticed from the previous AYN videos is they've just had a random RGB. It's just been unicorn vomit, as it were. Just goes between one colour to the next colour to the next colour. They've got a little colour wheel here and they can manually change that colour. But there doesn't appear to be a setting for anything else. You know, you might want your RGB to be two-tone. Okay, it's not going to be controllable across the device. You know, different LEDs or different zones. Looks like it's just all one zone, which is fine, but you may want it to flick between, say, that shade of purple and blue, because those two colours go quite well together. It looks like you can't. It's one colour or potentially rainbow vomit, and they don't show you how to get that option. I've also noticed that it looks like it needs a little bit of tweaking. So that was on purple from down here all the way to when it turned to light blue. Again, when you'll see them in a minute, scrolling back the way, it'll stick on purple over into green. See that? It's quite lethargic and not so precise. So although you've got quite a lot of options there, you don't have all the options. So in here we can see they're changing resolutions. We'll just pop back a little bit. So they've got quite a lot of baked in resolutions. That's brilliant to see, because obviously 1080p screen. It's a 6800U this, but it's going to be the same software I believe that they'll use on all their models. So 1080p isn't going to work on a 720p screen, or for perhaps a game that won't even run at 1080p at decent, meaningful rates. You may want to set it to something much lower, like 960 by 600, and scale it up from there. So that's really good to see that. It's also good to see they've got their variable FPS, their refresh rate of the screen. So 40, 60 and 50. I don't know if I'm run that way, but that's fine. It'd be actually quite good to see an even slower one, maybe a 21, which would be good for games like XCOM. Doesn't stretch. I noticed that. Have you noticed that it's got massive borders when you change it to 1024 by 768? Well, it is a square resolution, so you'd expect that, to be honest. But that might be quite useful for some really old PC gaming. We're back to the RGB lighting. So here's where I noticed it. Look, see, it's kind of still blue. Now it's gone red. Missed the purple entirely, and there's no green until there. But then it's rounded blue. So it doesn't look the most precise. Looks like it needs a little bit of work. And this point here is like set to red, and then I'll set it to green and click out, and it's still on red. So that needs a little bit of work. And this final part of the video is basically just showing that they've managed to create the software where it takes the settings from themes, which isn't bad. Nothing worse, I suppose, than an app which is always, light mode and grey when you've changed all the rest of your background. It's a good start. We're going to knock them for this. This is absolutely what we wanted. Okay, there could be more, like I say, an option to save profiles and then possibly allocate games to those profiles. That would be really good. It shouldn't be too difficult to bake in. So I think what they've done so far is really good. We have a control center that allows us to bake in settings. Fantastic. What we don't have is a way to save those profiles, because you'll want to have more than one profile. In fact, in my case, on my Anbernic Win 600, I've got something like 8 profiles with different power settings at each one. And I would want to do that here as well. And I would also like to be able to specifically allocate games to those power plans, which would be absolutely perfect. And that would include resolutions. So when you loaded up, let's say Forza 5, for example, you may not want it to run at 1080p, you may want it to run 720p, you may want to give it, extra power to the GPU but less power to the CPU, you don't want to boost it quite so high. You want to be able to save that profile so that when you're playing when you're playing Forza 5, you can get that specific setup. You might want a different setup for, say, GTA, where you want to max everything out because it's an older game. You may want to do a low power one for an indie title, but you want to be able to allocate them, set them up once, is what I'm saying, not set them up every time you try a new game. So anyway, it's great to see some more content from AYN. If you like what I do, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.